Hello and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Storm in the Village by Miss Reed. Miss Clare, in Dr. Martin's opinion, had gone back in health during the past few weeks, and he knew, as well as the rest of Fairacre knew, just why. The indiscretions of her lodger had not passed completely unnoticed, though no one quite knew how far the affair had gone. Miss Clare had been blaming herself needlessly for not warning the girl against the Franklin fellow, whose name was a byword. Could she have helped her more? The question remained unanswered in the days that followed Hilary Jackson's adventure and sadly troubled Miss Clare. Mr. and Mrs. Annett had evolved a plan of which Dr. Martin thoroughly approved. "We're taking a little house for 3 weeks in August by the sea near Beresford," George Annett had said to the doctor when he had called in with young Malcolm's tonic. "Though why he needs a tonic, I really don't know," observed the doctor, eyeing his young patient, who was bouncing energetically up and down in his pram to the detriment of its springs. "But you ordered it," protested Mrs. Annett, wide-eyed. She looked up from buckling her exuberant son into his harness. "Should have been a bromide," returned the doctor, smiling. "Push him into the garden and then come and tell me all about the holiday plans." It appeared that the Annetts were as perturbed as the doctor himself about Miss Clare's frail health, and had invited her to spend 3 weeks with them by the sea, but she had gently declined. "There's a spare bedroom," went on Mrs. Annett earnestly, "and we truthfully would love her to be with us, and I'm sure the air would do her a world of good. But she feels she may be in the way, and she would be an added expense, that you 3 young things should be together alone, and so on and so on. I know. You don't have to tell me what's in Dolly Clare's mind. She's a living saint and as obstinate as a mule," responded Dr. Martin. "Can you do anything to help?" asked Mr. Annett. "I should think I might try," said the doctor, his eye taking on that gleam which meant he was up to his tricks. "I shall tell her that you 2 could get out together if she weren't such a selfish old woman as to refuse to do an hour or two's babysitting." "Please," begged Mrs. Annett, horrified, "don't say anything so wicked." "And then I could tell her that I am having sleepless nights because she is such an obstinate patient and won't do as she's told, and my health is suffering," he continued, warming to his theme. "And finally, I could threaten her with her sister Ada, who has offered somewhat grudgingly to have her there if need be. That should settle it nicely," said this incorrigible meddler in the affairs of others with a satisfied smile. The Annetts gazed at him aghast. George was the first to find his breath. "I don't really think there's any need for such wholesale lying," he began in a schoolmasterish voice, but he was cut short. "There's no need at all," agreed the doctor with a disarming smile, making his way to the door. "But I enjoy a thundering good lie if it makes my patients see reason. Remember your Kipling?" He stood in the doorway, his white hair standing out like an aureole and his eyes twinkling. "Not a little place in Tooting, but a country house with shooting and a ring-fenced deer park lie," he quoted triumphantly and vanished into the sunshine. The door of Miss Clare's cottage stood ajar on that throbbing hot afternoon. Dr. Martin put his head round, but there was no one to be seen. He stepped down into the brick-floored living room. It was cool in here, under the sheltering thatch, and a fine bouquet of mixed roses caught his eye. Their reflection gleamed in the polished table on which they stood. He looked around him, noting the freshness of the curtains, the gleam of copper on the mantelpiece, and the crystal clearness of Miss Clare's leaded panes. These silent objects stood as proof of their mistress's zeal and devotion to them. They might be older than and as frail as their owner, but they were as full of grace. "An hour's less polishing and 1 more hour in bed," thought Dr. Martin, "would be ideal, but I'll never get her to do that, I fear." A small noise attracted his attention. He went to the door of the box staircase, opened it by its latch, and called aloft, "Anybody there?" There was a creaking of a bed, and Miss Clare's voice answered, "I'll be down in just 1 moment, doctor. I was having a rest." "You stay there, then. I'll be up," said the doctor, stooping for his black bag. "But I'm in my petticoat," began Miss Clare. "All the better," responded Dr. Martin, mounting the narrow stairs sturdily. "I want to listen to your chest anyway." He entered the bedroom to find his patient propped up against two fat feather pillows with the eiderdown over her legs. Miss Clare's top half was decorously clad in a pale gray lock-knit petticoat with a modestly high neckline. A novel lay face downward upon the bed. Miss Clare smiled at her old friend. "It was too hot for anything round my shoulders," she said. "Well, you won't shock me, my dear, I can assure you. That petticoat's a sight more decent than Minnie Pringle's sun-top she was flaunting in the lane just now." He fetched a cane-bottomed chair, set it by the bedside, and adjusted his stethoscope. It was very quiet in the cottage bedroom. Outside, a faint rustling came from the jasmine at the window, and a sparrow, who lived in the thatch above, glanced in upside down with a beady eye and, with a frightened chirp, flew away. "Huh," said the doctor grimly, folding up his instrument and stuffing it in the black bag. "You're not doing as well as you should." "I'm sorry," said Miss Clare contritely, and patted the doctor's hand as though it were he, not she, who needed reassurance. Dr. Martin saw his opening. "I must admit it worries me. Here I am doing all I can for you, and I do honestly believe you are eating more and resting more often, but you don't quite get on as I'd like. I don't mind telling you, Dolly, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm past my job." He shook his white head slowly. For such a burly fellow, he really had a very nice line in pathos. Miss Clare watched him quizzically. "You can't be expected to replace worn-out hearts," she said gently. Dr. Martin continued to look sad. "I wonder if you ought to join forces with your sister Ada," he said, with such sweet, spontaneous reasonableness that even he was surprised to hear his own voice. "Never," declared Miss Clare firmly. "Not even for your comfort, Doctor." Dr. Martin now rose and paced restlessly about the diminutive bedroom, his head narrowly missing the beam that ran across the whitewashed ceiling. He thrust his hands into his pockets, and with shoulders hunched, he prowled thoughtfully, wearing an expression of extreme perplexity. Miss Clare watched him affectionately. "If only you could get away somewhere, have a change of air, preferably by the sea, say for 2 or 3 weeks, I believe it would set you up completely." "Would it?" said Miss Clare with suspicious meekness. "Indeed it would. Otherwise I must see about a nursing home or something of that nature for you, for a spell before winter." There was a slightly threatening note in this last sentence which did not elude Miss Clare. "And what about my lodger?" "Your lodger," burst out the good doctor, standing stock-still and glaring at his patient over the bed-rail, "could do with a damn good spanking, and I hope her father's given her one by this time." "She's only young and silly," Miss Clare began to protest, but was cut short. "I won't waste my breath on such a fool, but she's responsible for your setback, and that I cannot forgive." "I shall get better now that the holidays are here. Don't worry about me." "You won't unless you get away. Everything here reminds you of her, and in your present low state, it will take more than half an hour under the eiderdown to cure you, my girl." There was a pause, and the doctor and patient looked steadily at each other across the quiet room. The doctor broke the silence first. "Dolly, I shan't feel at ease until you have a holiday. What about it?" Miss Clare gave him a slow, lovely smile, but her eyes were mischievous. "You've been talking to the Annetts," she said. Dr. Martin threw his head back in a gusty laugh. "Well, what of it?" he protested. "I did just have a word, and planned all this after that word," smiled Miss Clare. "And how well you do it, too. I was beginning to feel quite anxious about your failing powers." "But, Dolly," said the doctor, suddenly grave, "will you go? It isn't all humbug, you know. I'd like you to be well again. This offer means health for you, and a chance for those 2 young people to get out on their own without that baby, if you'd feel up to coping with it occasionally." This aspect of it, as the wily doctor had foreseen, touched Miss Clare at once. "If I really can be of help," she said slowly, "then I will go with the greatest pleasure." "You will," shouted Dr. Martin with delight. "That's the best news I've heard today. Now mind you keep your word." "Of course I shall," said Miss Clare indignantly. "And now if you'll wait downstairs, I'll get dressed and we'll make a pot of tea." "Put your legs straight back under the eiderdown," ordered her medical advisor, "and I'll make the tea and bring it up here." Whistling discordantly, the doctor clattered cheerfully downstairs. His last call of the day was at Fairacre Schoolhouse, where he found a most interesting operation going on. Mrs. Pringle had for many months deplored loudly and bitterly the condition of the spare room feather bed. "One heave," she said to me, "and the room's thick with feathers. As soon as we gets a fine still day, I'll tip the lot into a new tickin and run it up for you." She had been as good as her word, and the new striped mattress cover, with its inside seams carefully sealed with a dampened piece of that yellow bar soap which was Mrs. Pringle's household standby, lay spread on the lawn awaiting its contents. Mrs. Pringle and I had spread an enormous sheet on the grass and together had emptied out a mountain of feathers, white, speckled, and coppery brown upon it. Mr. Willett, who had come to clip the hedges, had abandoned his job and joined us on the lawn. He greeted the doctor boisterously. "Us only wants the tar, Doc, and then us'll be all ready for you." "Not in this heat, Willett. Have pity, man," said Dr. Martin, settling himself in the shade. He looked at Mrs. Pringle, who was busy turning the feathers over and over, "to get a clean air into the poor things," as she so tactfully told me. "That leg any better?" he inquired. "Torture," said that lady implacably. "Simple torture. Flarin', burnin', twitchin', jumpin', itchin', throbbin'." "No better then, I take it," said the doctor calmly. He lay back upon the grass and closed his eyes. Mrs. Pringle cast a disgusted glance at his peaceful figure. "What if a wind comes up?" asked Mr. Willett suddenly. "Come wind, come rain, come fair, come foul," announced Mrs. Pringle majestically, "my leg's still torture to me." "Wasn't speaking of your leg, gal, but the feathers," responded Mr. Willett without gallantry. "You wants to thank the Lord you're not worse. Remember last Sunday's psalm?" "I know as well as you do," answered Mrs. Pringle sourly, "and I remember some pretty botched-up singing, too, in the new chant." Mr. Willett was stung. "There wasn't one of us in that choir could sing that agrarian chant," he said wrathfully. "I don't say Annett don't know his job at teaching, but for choir master he's got some pretty rum ideas. Too popish by half, you ask me. Might just as well go to St. Peter's over the other side of Caxley." "And what, pray," began Mrs. Pringle loftily, "is wrong with St. Peter's? I went there a time or two when I was courting, and we had some real beautiful services." "I been there," said Mr. Willett heavily, "but the once. Never again, I said, never again. Pictures all round the walls, curtains hanging up, candles blazing away all over the place, people bobbing up and down. I tell you," Mr. Willett's sturdy Calvinistic frame shook at the very remembrance of the place. Dr. Martin rolled over onto his front, giving me a slow wink on the course. "And that minister of theirs," continued Mr. Willett warmly, "a beardless boy, young enough to be my son, told me to call him father when I spoke to him. I tell you it's against nature, and so's that agrarian chantin' to my mind, no proper tune at all." "Maybe you just don't know real music when you hears it," suggested Mrs. Pringle sarcastically. She bent over the feathers, corsets creaking, and began to stuff handfuls into the new mattress cover. I knelt down beside her, and Mr. Willett and Dr. Martin set to with us. The sun beat on our heads, and the white sheet reflected the light blindingly. Despite the heat and energetic thrusting of feathers, Mr. Willett rose to the challenge. "I heard the Messiah at the Corn Exchange last year," puffed Mr. Willett, "and that's what I call real music. Good, plain, God-fearing, English-sounding music that you can sing out hearty. It done you good. Plenty of ups and downs, and soft and loud, and everyone having a rattling good time of it." "Take some beatin'," agreed the doctor, sneezing some feathers from his nose. "Here, why don't we lift the lot up in the sheet and ram it all in?" This sensible suggestion was welcomed. Mrs. Pringle and I folded the sheet carefully, imprisoning the rest of the ubiquitous feathers, some of which had floated far and wide in the summer garden, while the two men held open the gaping mouth of the ticking. Coughing and spluttering, we finally made the transfer. The sheets still bore a mass of fluff, and the lawn looked as though a snowstorm had passed over it. "Fiddlin' stuff," observed Mr. Willett, "but it'd give us all a nice set down and chat. I'll be back to my hedges." He stumped off, swinging the shears and humming to himself. Mrs. Pringle watched him go. "What that chap lacks," she said, "is soul." Dr. Martin refused all refreshment, picked himself a rosebud, and returned to his car. "Nearly forgot," he said. "I called to tell you that Miss Clare is going to have a break with the Annetts by the sea." "That's absolutely wonderful," I cried. "How did they manage to persuade her?" "They didn't," answered Dr. Martin smugly. "I did." The car moved slowly forward. "What farrago of arguments did you concoct this time?" I shouted after the departing car. 2 derisive hoots were my answer, and I returned, smiling, to my feathered garden. Chapter 16. Miss Crabbe reappears. The heat continued. A few days after Dr. Martin's visit, I went to Devonshire to spend 3 weeks with 2 sisters, friends of mine since childhood, who owned a cottage by the sea. Sunshine, sea, bathing, boating, walking, and the cheerful companionship of old friends dispelled my Fairacre worries about Miss Clare, the future of the school, the housing estate, and the problem of Hilary Jackson's affairs of the heart. The holiday was almost at an end, and I was spending an hour doing a little leisurely shopping for gifts to take back with me, when I decided that the blazing sunshine reflected from the tiny Market Square cobbles called for an ice. I turned into a small cafe, and on opening the door came face to face with Miss Crabbe. Our mouths dropped open in surprise. "On holiday?" I inquired weakly. Miss Crabbe assured me that she was combining business with pleasure, attending a summer course at a nearby manor house recently taken over for this purpose. I persuaded her to return to her table and eat another ice while she told me all about it. My invitation was not completely altruistic, as I welcomed this opportunity of finding out how matters stood between this lady and my unfortunate assistant. "The course is most imaginatively conceived," began Miss Crabbe, and I felt that dreadful ennui overtaking me as she got into her stride. "It deals with every possible means of self-expression, and we have tackled pottery making, miming, finger painting, and stick printing. Some of us have attempted some really worthwhile work in music, making our own instruments first, as a matter of course, and I have made a set of most satisfying bamboo pipes." The voice droned on while I demolished my ice. As I had noticed during Miss Crabbe's visit to my house, she had the ability to eat and talk at the same time, and even quite large portions of strawberry ice seemed to glide down whilst an endless flow of words streamed up from the same orifice. I was fascinated. No mention was made of Miss Jackson, and I determined to broach the subject myself. There was no doubt about it. Miss Jackson might be well influenced by the woman who now sat with me, and it was worth asking for her help. Hilary's reckless behavior with this undesirable man had dated from her clash over him with Miss Crabbe, for before that time, as far as I knew, she had been a little more circumspect. What Miss Crabbe thought really mattered to the girl, and I suspected that their estrangement was a secret source of great grief to both of them, but that neither would give way. Miss Crabbe's countenance flushed an unlovely pink when I spoke of Hilary Jackson. "I have had no word from her since we met at Fairacre," she said stiffly. "We had made tentative plans for visiting Brittany, but as I heard nothing, I applied to come on this course at the last minute. She seems to have become a very silly girl there since she left the college. We all had great hopes of her there." The last 2 sentences were spoken so primly that she could only imply that Hilary's shocking state of silliness was due to the influence of those foolish people whom she had met since leaving college. I did not rise to this bait. "To be frank," I said, "I think Hilary Jackson has always been a silly girl, but she has 2 great qualities, warm-hearted affection and loyalty to her friends. In this affair with Franklin, it is these 2 qualities which have led her astray." I paused for a moment, wondering whether I dared go on. Miss Crabbe's mouth, now mercifully free from food, was set in a stubborn line. I decided that I might as well hang for a sheep as a lamb, and continued. If only she could have continued to direct this affection and loyalty to you, I think all would have blown over between Hilary and this fellow. But when she saw that you felt so strongly about it, she was forced to take sides. Unfortunately, she took the wrong side, and because she was so thoroughly miserable, she flung herself at this man. Then she's only herself to blame, remarked Miss Crabbe decidedly, but to my watchful eye she appeared slightly mollified. Loyalty to him, I went on, won't allow her to get in touch with you, as she knows that you don't approve. But believe me, she has been desperately unhappy about this break, and I know she'd give the world to make things up if only you'd give her a sign. Miss Crabbe began drawing geometrical patterns on the tablecloth with the handle of her spoon. Her face was set and thoughtful. She, too, I guessed, had suffered considerably from the withdrawal of her young friend's adulation. Jealousy of John Franklin was merely the outcome of her own overweening pride. It would be so much easier for you to make the first move, I went on. You are an older, wiser woman, and if you left John Franklin's name out of it for a bit, I'm positive that the whole wretched affair would die a natural death. The man does not want it, I feel convinced. Meanwhile, Hilary makes herself unhappy, and Miss Clare and her parents and all her friends. She does indeed, said Miss Crabbe slowly and softly. She looked up from her drawing and took a deep breath. I'll think it over. It might be a good thing for the girl, she said. It would be a great service to everyone, I responded, particularly to Miss Crabbe herself, I surmised privately. I should be very grateful indeed. She is at the start of a very promising career. A word from the right person now means such a lot. Miss Crabbe inclined her head graciously. I looked at my watch. Would you like to come and meet my friends? I asked. They have a little house in 4th Street just round the corner. But Miss Crabbe excused herself, saying that she must get back to a percussion band class after tea. We parted amicably in the hot sunshine. I'm glad we met, I said truthfully, and do please help if you feel you can. I shall sleep on it, Miss Crabbe assured me solemnly, but I think I may say here and now that I shall extend the olive branch to that poor misguided child. And so we parted, she to her percussion band class, and I to my friend's cottage, where I celebrated this minor victory with scones, strawberry jam, and a large dish of clotted Devonshire cream. And we shall continue our way through summer break next time.